Okay, so we've talked about viruses, we've talked about bacteria, we've talked about fungi, but of course there's many other different organisms around there. Protozoa are a big deal. Chuggas, which is a different type of chugga than the mushroom chugga. Okay, it's kind of like a kind of like a little bit of a fluke thing. It can cause some fairly dramatic diseases in us. Of course, malaria will be another organism that can really function inside of our body. Giardia, sometimes called beaver fever, can affect us as other cohabitational functions. So these are all different organisms that can play a role inside of us. Nematodes, worms, tapeworms, whatever the case may be, all are other types of organisms that can play havoc with our body. Again, they come along with ecological issues, both external and internal. If our overall immune system is good enough, we should be able to kill them so they can't come through if our digestive enzymes. So if we swallow something with nematodes in it, theoretically our hydrochloric acid will be strong enough to kill it, so we don't have to worry about it. One of our first lines of defense. If it gets through there, there's other checks and balances along the way. So before they can come to a point that it's problematic, we have to have an overall a weakened immune system to a degree. But it can only be one sector. We could have an autoimmune disease where it's too strong in some sectors and weak in other sectors and still have these kind of things. On the other side of that same thing, hypersensitivity. This is when a person overreacts to various things. And probably the most common hypersensitivity is hay fever, sinus infection, those kind of things. In this case, the person overreacts from environmental stimuluses. There are 4 types of hypersensitivity, 3 of which literally work with immunoglobulins, which again, immunoglobulins, as you might remember, are a chemical derivative of our immune system. Type 1, also called anaphylaxis, which is a little bit of a strong misnomer because you don't have to have anaphylaxis. Even hay fever is a type 1 allergy, so it's not gone all the way to anaphylaxis. Usually this is a local phenomena. It usually happens within a few minutes of exposure. You might be allergic to cats or dogs or birch pollen or grass pollen or whatever. The first time you're exposed to it, usually you don't have that strong of an action. That stimulates the formation of the mast cells to be able to create the immunoglobulins. Then the next exposure or additional exposures, it can be problematic. When I'm saying it's a second exposure, it's not always the case. That's a general phenomena. I remember a professor of mine in university, he could be stung. No, in his case, sorry, I've had 2 different instances. Like in his case, he didn't have any problem with poison ivy. He could pick it up, he could play it, he could distribute it, and he got kind of cocky on this whole thing. Never bothered him. For 25 years, he would do botany classes where he's handling it and stuff like that. And one day he handled it, and he literally went into anaphylaxis, had to get stat to the hospital. He was in the hospital for weeks because it was like an accumulative effect that all of a sudden, okay, I've had enough. And all the poison ivy had heavied up on him for 25 years. And now he can't even go near where it grows. He doesn't have to touch it anymore. If he goes near where it grows, he gets a poison. When I say he does now, there's a good possibility that he's actually dead at this point in time because he was elderly then. Yes?
So would that be like toxic shock syndrome?
It's kind of like toxic shock, but it's a different phenomena than toxic shock.
Okay, but same sort of reaction?
The same kind of reaction that we could have. I've seen the same thing with bees and ants too. Some people have no problem with bees or ants, and all of a sudden it gets to a certain level and bam, I had a major anaphylactic reaction to an ant in the Amazon. We still to this day, because the diversity of ants in the Amazon is so huge, nobody's even named 10% of the species. So it was on the azulas. We thought it was an azula ant. It was one of those great big huge suckers. And when you got an ant crawling on you that big, that's a big ant, right? They're huge. And that's why the reserve got called the azula after that. But it bit me, and I went into anaphylactic shock in the middle of the jungle, which could have killed me, but fortunately it helped me meet a shaman. And so I went through a whole bunch of other things. What this does, of course, creates a histamine reaction. The histamine reaction is really trying to shove things out, so it contracts the smooth muscles, enhances vascular permeability, the air passage is shut down, hay fever, asthma can be a result of this, and sometimes it's anaphylaxis that you've got 6 minutes to get to the hospital, you're dead, unless you have an EpiPen around or whatever. Really, when I go to foreign countries, I should always carry an EpiPen with me. I never have. I do have EpiPens at home, just in case, but an EpiPen will take down the histamine, but the headache and the recuperation of it for a day or two is kind of disastrous. So far, what I've always done is consumed, when I've got into a reaction like that, I've just consumed very large amounts of reishi, and it's always worked for me, so it's not been that bad. In this case, when I was in the jungle, I just had some smoke blown on me and some songs sang over me and some water sprinkled on me, so I was fixed in this case with the shaman communicating with at that level, and it was the songs that probably healed me more than anything else, and maybe the smoke he was blowing in my face, but I didn't ingest anything. So it can be done with different mechanisms, for sure.
When you say large doses of reishi,
well, there's been several examples I've been involved with, both personally and with people around me. I've taken 6 to 8 capsules at a time. I've had patients that have opened 6 to 8 capsules of the stronger stuff and literally made it into kind of a thick paste and then drank it. A couple tablespoons of the reishi powder as a tea. Probably the reishi tea, which is obviously more bioavailable because of the way it is, will be the route to go. The problem is you're not always of mind. If you're doing it in capsule, you have to wait till it dissolves and all that kind of stuff. So you take a whole bunch of capsules and you drink a bunch of water to dissolve it as fast as possible while you're waiting for everything to happen. But that's, again, usually less than 6 minutes. So I've definitely had people at the farm that have gone into anaphylaxis. The ambulance is being called. The EpiPen's sitting there waiting to do it. They want to wait, and they've taken large amounts of reishi. And by the time the ambulance got there, they've gone on anaphylaxis. But because of it, we always have 1 or 2 EpiPens in the fridge.